This is Ayani.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast.
Holiday edition. Hello and welcome to the holiday edition of our podcast. As we're recording this, the semester has wrapped up. We're not traveling anywhere because it's a pandemic. We're trying to be less sad, so we're doing a podcast. How are you, Ayani?
Oh, I mean, you just got really real right there for a second. I'm okay. Trying to be less sad, looking at my tiny Christmas tree in the living room, watching Andrew play Destiny in the background. So, I'm hanging in there.
I will say the tiny Christmas tree helps a lot. I also have a tiny Christmas tree.
Yeah. So, trying to wrap my brain around what the end of the semester means and trying not to think of what the spring semester means and, yeah, hanging in there.
Life of grad students in a pandemic.
Trying not to think about my dissertation. Ha, 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 ha.
Okay, weirdo.
But yeah, so what are we doing today on our holiday podcast?
So today, and after much Twitter storm happened around this particular movie, we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the film Happiest Season. In order to decide to talk about Happiest Season, we actually put up a poll on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. We did a lot of polls.
We did.
But you can find us on all of those places at Sex Love Lit.
Yep.
Oh, and we do have a new Facebook page. That's new.
Oh, that is new. We do have a new Facebook page. So admittedly, we were kind of like, we're not going to do a Facebook page. That's a lot of social media to monitor and maintain.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody's on Facebook. So we made a Facebook page. And I think if you search Sex Love Lit, just like you would on Twitter, on Instagram, you can find it in the search bar. Yeah.
But so in our last episode, we had mentioned that we were going to do our next episode on Schitt's Creek, which is still something we're going to do. But because there was so much interest in Happiest Season, we thought it would be worthwhile to talk about it, especially since when we watched it for Quarantine Book Club with some of my former students, we had many feelings.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost putting it mildly. Like we should have just recorded that session of us talking to your students and made that the podcast. But yeah, there was a lot of feelings going on in that conversation. And since Happiest Season is kind of topical in a way, right? It is 100% a Christmas film that came out for the holiday season. And it's December. We thought it, would be a good way to kind of, have a little special episode that we'll come back to Schitt's Creek eventually. But I don't know. We had a lot of feelings and we wanted to share them with y'all.
Yeah. But so for those of you, if you somehow not become familiar with Happiest Season, how about you tell people what it's about, Ayani?
Oh, that's right. I forgot that was on me. So yeah, Happiest Season is a 2020 American romantic comedy that debuted, I think, towards the end of November. It was directed by Clea Duvall, and from what I'm understanding, it's actually kind of a semi-biographical tale of her own experiences.
Also, can I just say that it would not even occur to me to equate my life to a Hallmark-style Christmas film, because it's not a Hallmark film. It's on Hulu,
right?
But my life is not like that.
Well, I mean, that when you're creating a narrative, right? I'm sure that there are liberties. That's why it's semi-autobiographical, right? She's not saying that this is her exact lived experiences that she's gone through. There's some zhuzhing to make it a more Christmassy kind of thing. But yeah, so just for a really quick synopsis of the film, it is about two lesbians who end up going home for the holiday season, but it turns out that one of our characters has not told her family that she is a lesbian, and there's this kind of ruse is not the quite right term, but this decision that they make that the other in the pair is just going to pretend to be their straight friend that is coming home for the holidays because their parents have passed and they don't celebrate with any other family members. So yeah, it was, oh yeah, in our notes it says it came out on the 25th of November. So this is a really, really recent film. I know a lot of the things we talk about are pretty recent, but like this hasn't even been out a month. And people all over the internet, let's say, have been having a lot of feelings about it. Every time I log on to Twitter or Facebook, somebody's making some kind of comment about Happiest Season, even though I think maybe the initial wave has passed.
Mm-hmm.
There's been mixed feelings about it too, I think.
Mm-hmm. So even though it was critically well received, so like on Rotten Tomatoes it has 84%, which is like, especially for like a Hallmark style holiday film, is really high.
Right.
Like another one that we watched that is like not of note, it was fine, is Holiday. And Holiday, which again was fine, only has 44% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That movie was bizarre, but I wouldn't give it 44%. But okay. All right.
It was functional, but so compared to that, Happiest Season did really well.
Yeah. But we, I don't know. We weren't the wildest about it. But before we launch into that kind of conversation, you want to tell us about characters and people and who the playing field is?
So to remind you of who this film is about, or to tell you if you haven't seen it and may not want to see it after this podcast. So this movie does have a pretty stellar cast. It has Kristen Stewart as the main character, Abby, and her girlfriend, whose home they are going to for Christmas. Harper is played by Mackenzie Davis. We also have Aubrey Plaza as Riley Johnson, Harper's ex-girlfriend, high school ex-girlfriend. And then Dan Levy, who, I guess we get a little bit of Schitt's Creek in here, but as John, Abby's best friend. And then we have like a whole bunch of other people, like Victor Garber plays the dad, Mary Steenburgen plays Harper's mom. Like there's just like a really, it's a really solid cast. Yeah. And when I saw the trailers and saw this cast, I was really excited about it.
Yeah. I know I was definitely, I don't know if I would say I was excited, but I was definitely curious because I did like a lot of the cast. And the trailer seemed, if I set my expectations for a fun kind of Christmas movie romp. So I was like, this will be fun. I'll enjoy this. It'll be kind of a popcorn flick,
I wasn't expecting anything deep, but I was expecting something fluffy and entertaining. And this is not what I got.
Yeah. Before we dive into our deep, heavy feelings, before we dive into that, what are some things we liked about Happiest Season? Did we have positive feelings about it? Does it do some things well?
I mean, in the spirit of doing a generous reading before we get very mad, a couple of things that I do appreciate about this film is that it has queer actors playing queer people, like Kristen Stewart is bi, Mackenzie Davis is bi, Dan Levy is Dan Levy. Like, we do have like an actual queer people in the cast. We also have, I think, some really solid queer friendships happening. It's not just queer people existing like as lonely islands where their only relationships with other queer people are romantic. We do have like friendships, which are, I think, very refreshing.
Yeah, I remember, this is adjacent to what you're saying, but I remember reading a Twitter post once that was like, I never quite trust when you have a Black main character and they don't have any other friends or family members that show up that are Black. So it's kind of like people don't exist in isolation, so to speak. So it's nice that it's not just, one queer character surrounded by a whole bunch of straight folks and, they're kind of tokenized in that way, so I agree. And I mean, Dan Levy is always a treat. So, I mean, in my humble opinion, he's definitely one of the best parts of the film. He has great comedic timing. The way that he delivered his lines were a lot of fun. In a way, he was, and I don't want to say he was playing himself, right? But this was a very similar character to what he does in Schitt's Creek, you know,
I mean, I will say that on IMDb, it has Dan Levy playing John as Daniel Levy. So, like...
Okay, so a little bit of, what, Dan Levyception there? Would that be?
Yeah, I mean, you were not supposed to think that Dan Levy was someone else.
Okay, fair. Very fair. I just, you know, I always want to be careful about the bound lines between actor and person. You know what I mean? Because we don't know them personally.
Oh, yeah.
But like the fact that IMDb is like, he was playing himself. Well, okay then. Alrighty then.
I also liked some of the things that Kristen Stewart was doing. She rocked some good looks.
Yes.
We also enjoyed, to speak for Ayane a little bit, we also enjoyed Aubrey Plaza's character.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Just get this out the way. We are of the mindset that Abby and Riley should have spent more time together, perhaps. You know, I'm not going to outright say that, you know, I shipped them. It should have been them at the end of the film. But like, there was some good chemistry there.
It also would have been complicated to like break up with your girlfriend who you were planning on proposing to date her ex-girlfriend. Like, I don't know. You're still inviting some crazy into your life if you do that.
I mean, fair. But also when you said that, I'm like, ooh, I would watch that movie. Would not want to live that life, but I would watch that movie. That sounds juicy. Write those notes down. All right.
But now that we have acknowledged some good things about the film, what did we not like? And also, one of the things we're trying to do here is not just be like, we hate this, it is bad, but also think about how it helps us think about sex and love and literature, to name drop our podcast.
I was gonna say title drop.
But like, it's not just like, this isn't a review podcast. I think thinking about specifically why we were angry through that lens, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. So you know what? Why don't we just start right up at the top of the thing that I know you spoke to a lot about that made you uncomfortable and upset about the film, and that I'm in agreement with you on. What is the relationship between Abby and Harper and how it's portrayed? So one of the things that made us very uncomfortable, to speak a little bit for you, but feel free to jump in here at any point, is that Harper wasn't a really good friend to Abby when they got back to her hometown.
And it's not just that she wasn't a good girlfriend, she wasn't even a good friend. She wasn't a nice person.
Yeah, there were many moments in which she was kind of blowing Abby off and giving her, not quite mixed signals, but like saying one thing and then explicitly doing another. I don't know. I like, if you came home with me to visit my family, I wouldn't treat you the way that Harper treated Abby. You know, I know the one sequence that really annoyed me is when they went out drinking. Oh, so hold on, before I continue, how are we doing spoilers? Like, am I going to get fussed at for spoiling this movie?
No, I'm not going to fuss at you. It's a short movie. If people want to watch it, they can. And also, if people are going to watch it, they probably already have. So
that's very fair. All right. So rolling forward with the spoilers. After the whole thing with Abby getting framed for stealing the necklace, which we are coming back to because that is one thing that also made me very upset watching this film. Harper has her meet her and her friends at this bar. Abby doesn't really want to like do shots and stuff. And Harper's like, no, you got to do shots with me and my friends. So we have some fun drinking peer pressure there, which is always great. But then when Abby's like, you know what, I'm a little tired, I'm ready to go home, after not seeing each other all day, after Harper going and doing some family stuff, Harper's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to stay out, which I guess on the surface is fine. But then when Abby checks in on her, Harper doesn't reply because she's apparently out getting drunk with her ex-boyfriend.
Who's clearly still into her.
Yeah, very much so still into her, and who she's flirting with as well. And I'm not gonna, shame her for having like, light flirtatious conversation, right? But also, she was out with him until 2:30 in the morning and didn't check in with Abby. So that's a little suspect. But then the next morning, when Abby comes up to be like, hey, baby, you were out late last night. I just want to see how you're doing. Harper gets all up in her feelings and is like, you're smothering me. I don't know why you're checking up on me. And it's like, I know my gut reaction was, this seems like a complete 180 from how we entered the narrative, which on one hand, of course, is if your partner suddenly is acting different, you want to be like, hey, what's going on? Is there a problem? Because, not everything has to do with you, but it just, the way it was portrayed and the way it was added up, it felt more like somebody engaging in controlling behavior.
Well, and a lot of the things that Harper was doing were like, she would use her love for Abby, or she said was her love for Abby, to justify and excuse her behavior. It's like, I'm only doing this, like, it's because I love you. It's like, I'll never do it again because I love you so much. And that is textbook abuse, like abusive behavior.
Yeah. So that was, I'm grunting, but go ahead. Yeah.
Certainly. So it's not necessarily part of what made me so grumpy about this is that this setup, I mean, that happens in real life, but the way that they're putting it in a romantic comedy as a romantic ideal, and that is where I get uncomfortable. And it's also, I think there's a way that it's using Harper not being out as like an excuse to be shitty, and I do not think that is fair to queer people, because I 100% believe and agree that coming out is difficult and
absolutely
an individual experience, and there is not one universal, but it still does not give you an excuse to be an asshole, especially to the people that you say that you love. And this movie gave Harper an out for being an asshole.
Yeah.
And
no, you're 100% right.
I was very angry about it.
Yeah. And I guess, so we're winding a little bit. One of the things that's funny, so we pull sometimes our synopses of films from Wikipedia, right? And one of the things that Wikipedia says is that the story follows a woman who struggles to come out to her conservative parents during Christmas, which is not at all how the movie was advertised.
Not at all.
So and to be fair, that's not at all how the movie starts either, because I think you're right. It kind of sets it up as a romantic comedy. You come into the film with a certain set of genre expectations and a certain set of trope expectations about what you're getting, right? You're coming in for some laughs. You're coming in for, some heartwarming love feels. Of course, there's going to be the moment when the main couple, has a disagreement and goes their separate ways. But if it's a romantic comedy, they're, in one way or another coming back together again, even if they're not coming back together as a couple. You know what I mean? So the fact that there are these kind of touchstones of abuse that are worked into this story that sets itself up or presents itself as kind of light-hearted in a way, then it doesn't feel like it's taking those things serious.
Yeah, it was so totally dissonant to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's playing things for laughs that are truly not funny.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And that was another one of the weird things about it. Like, there were moments that were funny. Like, Dan Levy was funny when he said, we need to talk about that fish. And she was like, what? And he was like, okay, bye. Or what kind of fish is it? I want one for myself. That was funny.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, even Dan Levy being like, I track people. I track the people that I'm dating. Like, that's not... That was still funny. And it's still, like, on the... Like, I'm not looking for everything to be rainbows and sunshines and butterflies. My plurals were not correct there.
Flies.
I'm not looking for everything to be, like, happiness and rainbows. But I'm also not looking for abusive behavior to be excused, and particularly to be excused to be like, but it's okay because they're gay.
Right.
No, it's not. It's not okay whether you're gay or not to be abusive to your partner.
Yeah. Especially since it seems like Harper has kind of a history of this kind of behavior.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was so upset about. Do you want to talk about what that is? What happens with that?
Yeah. So just a little bit of context to quote you. Harper and Riley dated in high school, maybe when they were like sophomores. We're talking young high school, right? Not going into college or anything. But they were both kind of keeping it on the low, keeping it secret because of pressures from their family, because of keeping up appearances, all that kind of stuff. And they used to write letters to each other, which also super sweet, like, aw. But they used to write letters to each other and leave them in each other's locker. But one day, somebody found the letter that Riley left for Harper, and Harper was like, oh, Riley's just obsessed with me, and she's gay, and blah, 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 blah. So pretty much Harper outed Riley to their entire school system, which, I mean, to the entire grade pretty much, which caused Riley to have to deal with, you know, all kinds of abuses, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and okay, so one of the reasons I think this was so upsetting to me is that, like, we are, so Ayani and I'm 29. Ayani is 33. You're 30 or 34. You just turned 34.
Yep, I did.
But so we're peers-ish with
right.
with like
characters.
with Abby and Harper and Riley. And the way that queer people are viewed in society has changed pretty dramatically over the last decade.
Sure. I mean, even thinking like what my high school experience would have been like versus yours, I think there would have been differences.
But like because of that, I mean, I still think that outing someone now is still not okay. This is still not something that is acceptable.
Which is something else we will come back to.
But I also think that especially 10 or 15 years ago, like outing someone at my high school is like an act of violence. Like, people who were out at my high school did not have a good time. And I think that, and it was just sort of like brushed off. And this is something that like Harper had not told Abby about. And she had just told her that Riley was her ex. And like, I'm not necessarily saying that we need to, because I think there also needs to be some sort of understanding and forgiveness for like things we do in our youth that like we didn't know better or we were afraid or like whatever. Like, it's not that Harper needed to be punished for that now, but like it was just sort of thrown out there and not adequately to me dealt with.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me is that there was no remorse at this point. It was just something that she had swept under the rug of her past. And then when confronted with the same experience again, with a woman that she claimed that she loved and that she told that she loved frequently, she reacted in the same way. So again, Harper's sister Sloane finds her and Abby, what were they, kissing or hugging on each other?
Yeah.
And pretty much outs her in front of their Christmas party, which also really pissed me off because that also just kind of gets swept under the rug too, and everybody's all hunky-dory about that. And then Harper reacts in the same way that she did when her friend found Riley's letter and pretty much throws Abby under the bus and says, what? I'm not a lesbian. That's not the case. I don't know what you're talking about, right in front of Abby's face. And it gets quote unquote resolved because she then, when everyone has left, is with her family, is like, no, I am a lesbian and I love Abby and, you know, I love her more than I'm scared of you, something like that. Or is that a quote from another movie?
I don't know.
It might be. And then, you know, everything's supposed to be okay because now she's come out to her family, but like, and then she apologizes to Harper at this point. I don't know. It just, I don't want to say it doesn't feel like enough, but it feels like everything is resolved in the end of the movie in a way that does not necessarily acknowledge the pain that was actually done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like they use words and are like, oh, I'm sorry, I love you. But there's no like demonstration that like they have changed or like that these patterns of behavior are different.
Yeah.
And in addition to being wildly unrealistic that Harper's conservative parents are like suddenly fine with it after like making snide comments about like Riley's lifestyle when they see her out at dinner earlier in the movie. So like even just like ignoring that part, like I don't know, like it's too resolved. And I know that is one of the tropes of rom-coms and also specifically of like your Hallmark variety rom-coms,
especially like holiday films. Yeah,
this isn't like I messed up I don't know. I don't watch that many Hallmark films, to be honest.
I burned the turkey.
Yeah, like I burned the turkey. I'm sorry about the mistake that I made. Okay, we've got a new turkey. Everything's fine. Like, no, this is like I previously rejected a key part of your identity, but now it's fine because it's Christmas and we got a family picture in our matching pajamas. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know if they were wearing matching pajamas. I might have been pulling on the matching
I
sweaters
think,
from Holiday
I think
there.
you are. I think you are. I don't think they were wearing matching pajamas. I mean, that is a trope. So like, you're not far off base, but no, I don't think that was part of it. Yeah. So that was one thing that definitely kind of frustrated us. But I think that also leads into something that one of your students pointed out that I thought was pretty astute, was that there was a shift in stakes over the course of the film that left us a little unsure about, as viewers, about how we were supposed to be interacting with the film. So when it starts, right, we have Abby and Harper together and they are a unit and they love and care about each other. But then Harper brings Abby into kind of a quote unquote hostile environment, right? And then it's set up so that it's like Abby and Harper against her family. So we're learning about the different types of uncomfortable family dynamics, how she fights with Sloane in a way that they say is normal, but
that's also not great.
So, but it's like them against the family. They're in on this secret between the two of them against the family that would want to encroach and break up their happiness. But then there's this shift in which it becomes Abby against Harper, in which beforehand we had them as a cohesive unit, but then Harper starts, I guess siding with her family, or just not. She becomes the antagonistic force.
She reverts to old behaviors.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. She reverts to old behaviors and becomes this antagonistic force against Abby, and pushes her away so much that Abby even kind of comes to the point where she's like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't want to be with her anymore. Right. Which is a huge move from kind of the wanting to propose. And then towards the end of the film, we have, it's like Abby and Harper, they want to get that storyline back together, but then they also have to rectify everything with the family very quickly. So it's like, as we're moving through, Harper becomes an quote unquote an enemy style figure. You know what I mean? And maybe that changes how we feel about her, and that might impact some of our reading of the film now at this point. But it was kind of a weird shift that maybe pulled us out of the film a little bit, broke some of the illusion.
It made it for me impossible to root for Abby and Harper as a pair, which that sort of leads to like one of the internet takes, which is that Kristen Stewart should have ended up with Aubrey Plaza instead, like because Harper sucked.
Yeah, she really did, and it's not just the stuff in her past, right? The character just, she wasn't, it felt like she was manipulative and, just didn't really feel like a good person. And I guess the thing about it that was also strange is that was all blamed on their upbringing, which, while I totally understand that your upbringing in a lot of ways shapes who you are, don't get me wrong. Her parents are not blameless in this narrative, but she's also an adult in her 30s. So at some point you do have to kind of take control over how your behavior impacts the world around you. She's not even 16. She's not 5, she has her own life, but she slips back into these behaviors and then blames her parents for the way that she's behaving. Which, I don't know, feels like an easy way out to me.
Well, and the film also like gives her that out. The film wants her to give her that out. And if the film, in like the narrative perspective, was like even pushed back at that assumption even a little bit, then maybe I could not forgive it, but accept it a little bit more. But like, it's all like, obviously it was her parents' fault, but like, she's fine now. She figured it out. Like that. No. Pass. I do not accept this.
No, and I guess that's, you're right. I don't accept it, because there's just so much about her that I'm like, you don't seem like a good person. I don't know if Abby should stay with you or be in this family environment that's not really going to accept her.
Well, it's like when the chips are down, Harper is not there. This is perhaps a good moment for you to complain about the twins.
Oh my God. Okay. These damn twins. Let's talk about it because I have a lot of feelings about them.
To give you some context, the twins that we are talking about, what are they? 8, 6?
I don't know,
I don't
something like
know.
that.
They're children. As a person who
Child
studies
8.
children's literature, I should be better at children, but I am not. But the
I think
twins,
they're older than 6, though. I think they're maybe like
yeah.
8. Not quite 10, you know?
So
But
they're not in double digits yet. But
right.
Sloane and her husband, the token black man in this cast, uh, they have these twins that are precocious and like want Sylvia Plath for Christmas or something. But they when
I think it
they
was like Sylvia Plath's whole, like,
the
it's not
collected works.
discography. Yeah, the collected works.
But Sloane takes them to the mall and Abby goes with them because they wanted to see Santa. She leaves her children with Abby. They stick a necklace in Abby's purse and set her up for shoplifting, which then
Yep.
leads to the whole family thinking that Abby is a thief because she is an orphan and that this is a character flaw. And then anytime anything goes missing after that, they accuse her of stealing it. And Harper does not have her back. But the
Nope.
twins also are never... Anyway, you can complain about this part.
Okay, so the twins never, it's not that they don't get their comeuppance, right? I'm not looking for somebody to be like, haha, 6-year-olds, we've got you. But at the very end of the film, Sloane has the children. They're like, they have something to tell you. And they come up and they say, Abby, we're sorry for putting the necklace in your bag. Then they turn to Sloane and say, can we open our stockings now? And she's like, sure, honeys, go ahead. So I'm like, wait a minute. These children set Abby up, and they're definitely old enough to know better. I think that's the key, right?
They're
These
old
are
enough
not
to know what they're doing.
Yeah, this is not the 1-year-old who accidentally grabs the candy because they have no concept of, paying for things. These kids know what's up. So they purposefully set Abby up, and then they are able to just go ahead with this ending where everything is schmaltzy and wonderful. And it seems like there's no kind of recourse. There's no kind of, there's nothing. It's just all supposed to be fine. And them saying, I'm sorry, fixes it.
And there's also like no apology from anyone for treating Abby like a thief for much of the movie.
Right.
Like,
there's
the mom in particular treats Abby so horribly.
Yep. The fact that there is no kind of actual apology that is made. And I think that comes back to this idea that there's almost too much of a tight bow that's tied on situations that are inherently messy, right? That everything is fixed at the end in a way that just doesn't, I don't know, it left me wanting. It feels kind of unrealistic. And also, really quickly, one of the things that felt really strange about the twins putting the necklace into Abby's purse is that since their father is the one, I mean, I think that the other guy might have also been.
Yeah, there's
he
one
was
other, like the assistant of one of the people working on the mayor's camp, or the dad's mayoral campaign. He might have been black, but like.
Yeah, but definitely a person of color at the very least, So the twins are portrayed as biracial, and the fact that we have kind of two children that are identifiable as black participating in a theft for laughs just feels like it's playing into some really not fun racialized tropes. Especially since they're the ones that planted on her. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It all just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And then I was like, these people ain't raising their kids right. They're just like, I can apologize, and then I get to have my full stocking of gifts. It's like, what? Okay. I don't know. It just, it almost seems like a lack of morality, almost like maybe they were supposed to be sociopathic children. I don't know. I just was not here for the twins.
And just like that. So aside from not being here for the twins, which is fine, like it just was upsetting that like Harper truly did not have Abby's back in that case.
Absolutely.
Like there was like a political dinner or something that like Abby was then disinvited from because they decide that she is a thief. And Harper was like, oh yeah, like, it would just be easier if you didn't come. Like, even if like I had my friend home for Christmas and I was going out to dinner with my family and my family was like, maybe just like leave your friend behind, I'd be like, excuse me? No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, like I can't I mean, and I understand, of course, that she has these pressures on her, but I couldn't imagine doing that to my spouse, being like, oh, everyone thinks you're a thief now. I'm gonna just go with it because I know, things happen. Like, no, that's not, especially since it is out of character. It's not like we have shown Abby to be a thief throughout the narrative. You know what I mean? That'd be a whole nother story entirely. But yeah, she doesn't have her back. I should say Harper constantly does not have Abby's back throughout this, which is upsetting. And again, makes it hard to root for them to get together. So that's that. And also, I'm sorry, do you remember the Sloane's husband's name? I want to say Kevin, but that feels very wrong.
Looking at it might have been Eric.
Is it Eric?
Yes, it is Eric.
Has a lot of similar letters to Kevin, so I'm gonna roll with it.
Does it?
Yeah, K-E.
Eric has a C.
Oh, it's Eric with a C, not Eric with a K? Oh, then I just fucked up. Never mind then. But anyhow, so one of the things that's weird about Eric, and when we were watching this with my spouse, we noticed this. He doesn't show up in the trailer at all. He just kind of appears in the promotional poster. And it's like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like another... It's like this movie wants the points for like being diverse, for telling a queer love story, for like it wants all these like points. It wants the credit, but it is not, to me, earned.
Right. Yeah, it felt a little tokenizing his role in the film, especially since he's found, I mean, it sounds like he and Sloane were already in the process of separating, but Sloane finds him making out with the only woman of color in the film in the closet, so it's just like, oh, this is all a little weird. This is all a little weird. But speaking of, if we're going to talk about characters, I'd really like to spend a second thinking about Jane and how Jane is used in the film. So I will say, of all the characters, I definitely related to Jane in a way that I didn't relate to the other members of that family. Because she's a little quirky. She wore my favorite color a lot. She's the writer of the family that's always talking about these fantasy novels. But it really... I was really frustrated in how the character was portrayed in the film. And I think what really, I guess, crossed the T for me, because beforehand it was like, okay, well, this is the trope that we're running with. It's fine. But at the end of the film, when her book's picked up and she's like this big hit author, they totally change her look. And they change her makeup and try to make her more quote unquote conventionally attractive like her other sisters, in a way that they tried to use her looks to separate her from both Sloane and Harper. And that kind of sat weird with me. Like, I think I mentioned this in the Quarantine Book Club, but like the spouse and I have been watching The Mandalorian. And one of the things that makes me scrunch my nose is when we have, okay, the good characters are the ones that look like us. They're the pretty ones, they're the human ones. And the bad characters are the ones that are ugly or different, right? It's very, very old hat tropes to make, the odd one out is that's the one that's the weirdo or whatever. So,
well, it's like how in... it's like you add glasses and curly hair and like they're not pretty anymore.
Oh,
like,
no,
what?
Not glasses and curly hair. Who could ever look pretty with glasses and curly hair? But no, well, that's like 100% the point. You know what I mean? And I guess it was kind of the quote unquote makeoverness of it at the end that made it feel so weird to me. Like if Jane just looked like Jane the whole time and then got her hit book and was still kind of rocking the quirky makeup or whatever, that would be one thing. But
I was also like uncomfortable with the way I think they were using Jane for laughs, particularly at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, and perhaps I'm reading too much into the film, but it almost seemed like they wanted us to think that she might have been like a little bit autistic or like not, what's the term for that?
Neurodivergent.
That she wasn't neurotypical in some way, but that we were supposed to not like her because of that, and to like empathize or at least sympathize with the parents for finding her frustrating.
Yeah.
I didn't like that.
No, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, because there were these kind of ways that she would...
They would act like she was missing. They that she was missing social cues, especially in the
Right.
way she like talked to Abby about being an orphan and like the
Hugging
kinds of
her
questions, and not like necessarily respecting conventional social boundaries, but it was in a
right.
way that was like, I think it felt like the film didn't want me to like Jane for that reason, and I
Right.
didn't like that audience positioning.
Yeah, and that was definitely blended with some of like the nerd tropes, you know what I mean? The fact that she's constantly talking about her fantasy novel and everyone's yawning and not paying attention to her, you know,
And
it's
that like at one of the Christmas parties, Jane like was clearly hunting for a man in a way that like also then made it explicit that like Jane was not attractive to men.
yeah. So, yeah, there was just a lot about the characterization of Jane that felt off. Yeah, and then they destroyed her painting, and that was supposed to be played for laughs too, you know. It's like,
It's not funny.
no, and I just felt so bad for her. And even when things were supposed to be getting tidied up and the father comes down and is talking to them about how he's treated them, he says to Jane, and Jane, I just know you wanted to be included. And I'm like, wait, Jane said one of the most poignant things in the whole film, and she's like, I like who I am, I like how I'm behaving, and you know, if you don't like it, you could suck it, pretty much. Then to kind of just write that off as, I just know you wanted to be included. It's like, wait, no. So yeah, I guess this comes back to me feeling like the ending was really tidy for a movie that was inherently messier than it wanted to be, and then it sold itself as, you know. So yeah, as we said, lots of feelings. And Andrew's in the background. Yeah, I think that covers a lot of what we wanted to think through. But is there anything else that jumps to your mind? Even happy things? Any positive notes we want to end on?
I mean, I think the thing that it's useful to think about, and then we should credit Andrew for this, is that as long as this does not, I mean, and this film was, I guess, a critical success, but that it does need to be okay to make bad movies about a specific population. In this case, I guess queer love story rom-coms, and like have that not mean that that's the last one for a decade.
Oh, sure,
that we keep
absolutely.
getting more.
Absolutely.
And it seems like, hopefully, that this is, whatever our feelings about this movie in particular, is part of a sea change of getting more queer representation in popular culture and like mainstream popular culture, not just
absolutely.
like indie films, which, you know, certainly deserve credit for what they've been doing for a lot longer. But I think it's important to balance perhaps optimism about like the future of this kind of representation with still holding it responsible for the kind of representation that it is. You don't get credit just for doing it. It also matters how you do it.
No, that's very fair. Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, it is important to critique narratives and look at how they're working and how they're not working. But like, but it is a good thing that the film was made overall. And I'm glad that some people are relating to it and enjoying it, you know? I mean, I think we asked an interesting question with your book club of who is this film for? Who is the audience of this film? And while I think it was difficult for us to pinpoint exactly who this film was for, there seemed to be kind of a general consensus that if somebody's getting something positive out of it, then it's a good thing that exists. It's a good thing that, you know, Hulu put this movie out for us to watch.
So anyway, that's how we feel about the Happiest season. How do you feel about the Happiest season? Let us know on Instagram or Twitter at Sex Love Lit, or on Facebook on our Facebook page, Sex Love Literature.
Yeah, and you can find our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts: Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Anchor. We're there for your listening pleasure. Yeah, so, and for our next episode, just to kind of wrap this up here for January, we are going to start off 2021 with Schitt's Creek.
Yes, so we will, for that episode, be doing something a little bit different. For this episode, we did a movie instead of a whole ass TV show. And for next episode, even though we're talking about, again, a whole ass TV show, we're going to do a deep dive into a single episode.
Yeah, which I think will be really exciting and interesting for us, since we'll get to do maybe more close reading of sequences. We'll really English major it up for everybody. But yeah, so this has been Sex Love Literature. I hope you had as much fun with us as we did with you.
Thanks for joining us in the year 2020, and we will see you in 2021.
Woo, yeah. So I guess happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa,
holidays, happy winter solstice,
and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
All right.
Bye.